How are we doing, guys? Today I'd like to talk about spanging.
What the hell is even that?
At what point does this make any sense?
It's a portmanteau for spare change. Basically, if you use it as a verb, hey, let's go spanging, we should go spanging, something like that. If you're using it as a verb, it's basically asking somebody for spare change.
Any change, mister? Absolutely. Could you spare some? Yes, I could. Will ya?
It's terrible and humiliating to be in that situation in the first place. However, what most people don't understand is that you can actually make a fair amount of money, so my girlfriend and I at the time, we would, sit out in the streets of Cambridge and Somerville, and, there's this one guy who definitely gave us each $5 on the way to and from his work or whatever, and he was one of the nicest people I'd ever met. That is one of the things that you have to look out for when you're in tough times. We definitely have to be looking out for people who are, trying to look out for their fellow human, people that are just trying to do the right thing, and it's hot as hell out today, and that's fine, because it's on topic. We're talking about homelessness, But it can be a quite lucrative activity, like I was saying, there's that guy that would walk by and give us, each $5, so 10 a piece, so we would get $20 just from that guy, and we would go out there with like a set limit that we would have that we needed to go. It was very much a one day at a time kind of a deal, where we were just doing it so that we could get what we needed to not feel the full effects of the situation that we were in, And myself and the friends that I had made out there, like the Harvard Pit Pirates, we would all, we all had sort of an agreement, in the first week or so of everybody kind of knowing each other, that you get what you need for you, but then whatever sort of was left over at the end, we would, it would look something like this.
I got 5 pieces of candy. I got a chocolate bar. I got a quarter. I got a rock.
And we would wind up, then sort of having we would then wind up being able to get fucked up enough to be able to go to sleep on the streets at night. And remember, we can always find good things to get out of bad situations. You just have to be looking for them. So it's hot as hell out here today, right? I didn't even want to come out of the house to do this today. However, since this week's topic is homelessness, I felt that it would be appropriate to sort of be outside for a while. And, we've covered spare change and all this other stuff. And, right, at the end of the day or the middle of the day or whenever, you have the availability. But we get to shower. We get to change our clothes in a private setting. We get to be inside, either due to the fact that we have a job or the fact that we are going to school, or, But basically, if you're part of the normal society, you have money, but all those things are unavailable to homeless people. Imagine the company that you work for closes today. You're just out of a job immediately. What are you going to do? You may have savings, but studies show that most Americans don't have the money set aside to cover a $500 emergency. So you no longer have a job. You either have savings or you don't. But if you do have savings, when you run out of it, you wind up on the streets because you can't pay your bills. What would you do? There's nowhere to go during the day. It's very rare to find places that will allow you to be there during the day, meaning like businesses and stuff. Loitering laws are everywhere throughout this country. So even if you find a place in the shade, or a place out of the rain, or a place out of the cold, you've all of a sudden found yourself homeless with no money. What are you going to do? How do you feed yourself or your family? You've heard of means testing? Well, now that's what you're in the middle of being tested on. You may have voted against things thinking, oh, that'll never happen to me. But every person that winds up in a situation that somebody says, I'd never find myself in that situation, nobody ever thinks that they're going to find themselves in that situation. It's just not something that people are going to plan on happening to them, because they think that they're going to handle a situation this way or that way. But Mike Tyson once said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So now that you know that the punch is coming, do you even have a plan? Because you've voted against all sorts of social programs that would have benefited you should you find yourself in that situation. People have voted to have things not in their backyard, and when everybody says that, then these places don't get built. Nobody wants to become homeless, okay? Sometimes people were in such as myself, but how do I say, the restraints on the access to care, basically the bar for entry was too high for myself, but it was definitely I've definitely seen the same sort of attitude shared by other people that were going through it, especially when I was back in 2010, 11, and 12, and then sort of just in and out, just sort of like in and out of programs the whole time. And, for the majority of my, let's say from like 17 through like 28, probably around there. But it was just kind of like, nobody wants to become homeless. And, a lot of people are there, I think, in theory, people who are going to push back against homeless services are going to say, oh, well, they made a choice. But if the choice is between being in a like abusive household or just taking your chances with strangers, I mean, there was a lot of people that were making that choice to just to try their luck and test it with strangers. It's sad when somebody's family doesn't feel like a family. It's just more of like on paper blood kind of thing. So, but I mean, I guess that, for those who might point out, oh, well, they had a choice, kind of not really. And a lot of times those abusive households led to drug problems and stuff like that. And, those are all choices. But I think, that our moral compass goes with us wherever we go. And so mental illness can be an explanation for something, but it should never be used as an excuse for something. Because, I mean, I was, like I've talked about, I made a lot of bad choices. However, I was trying to make the best choices, or like the least negatively impactful choices that I could make in those scenarios. And, I think that, quite frankly, too many people give up too quickly, and that I mean both, and any and all parties. I've come to think of, like, with my own mental health journey, right? So having BPD is different for everybody, and everybody has a different path to wellness, or at least a way to understand ourselves, understand like when our thoughts are going negative, and to trying to like slap its hand and be like, listen, I see you there, but like I know that that's an inappropriate reaction, or what have you. I've come to think of having BPD before treatment is like being the Joker. Then once you start getting treatment, you become like the Batman in that scenario, right? Where it's your job as Batman now to keep the Joker inside you under control, because whatever happened to us in our past is what it is. What we need to do as a society is to prevent Jokers from being created. Now, I mean, we're mainly touching on homelessness this episode. Obviously, mental health issues can lead to homelessness, and then being homeless because there's nowhere for anybody to go, thanks to the Lantern-Petra Short Act from back in the late 60s, early 70s. Let me know if you want the full deep dive into that act, because I've already started deep dive scripts for Supreme Court cases, and sort of different organizations throughout the years, and those will be some like more deep dive stuff, but mainly just trying to like spit facts and stories or whatever. And I've really released some short videos that you can check out on the channel, where it goes into some stories about finding like the good while homeless. And I've got to say that like some of the best people I met were homeless, and when I was homeless, we were all homeless together. Like some of the best, just some of the most caring, lovely people, and they just all came kind of from bad home lives and stuff. If we really want to do something to try to make America great, then why are we not taking care of the people? I don't give a shit where somebody is from. If they're living in America, they should be guaranteed basic things: access to health care, access to clean water, access to food, access to an opportunity to make their lives better. And if somebody's homeless, then we can have government-funded jobs programs where the labor to build those things before anybody asks, so where are we going to get the labor for that? The people who are going to live in those homes are the ones who can then build it. Where's the money going to come from? I don't know. Why don't we stop bombing as much? Could we settle on that? Maybe bombing a little bit less, because each one of those munition devices cost millions of dollars on their own. Now, the estimated cost to fix homelessness is in the billions. However, I think it was something like I think the highest estimate was like 31 billion. However, Every single year, we lose $100 billion from our GDP. And for those financially, fiscally minded of you out there, how does it not make sense to do, even if going on the highest estimates, even going 30 billion, that one-time down payment then gives people houses. And then if we pay for mental health care, again, these are things that will benefit everybody in the long run. Nobody wants to have mental health issues. Nobody wants to become homeless or get arrested. We have no control over our pasts. However, we can decide to make our future ours and make the right choices in life so that we can However, we can decide to make our future ours and avoid unnaturally dying of natural causes.